Imagine spending years building the most powerful navy on Earth, only to lose 4 aircraft carriers
In less than 5 minutes.
Those 5 minutes didn't just decide a battle, they changed the course of World War II. At the time, Japan seemed unstoppable. In just 6 months, it had conquered vast territories across the Pacific.
It had destroyed much of the American fleet at Pearl Harbor,
Captured strategic islands, and forced Allied forces into retreat after retreat.
Many believed Japan could not be stopped.
But one tiny island in the middle of the Pacific would change everything. Its name was Midway. On a map, Midway looked almost insignificant. A small coral atoll surrounded by thousands of miles of open ocean. But whoever controlled Midway controlled one of the most important gateways across the Pacific. Japan understood this. Its commander, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, created an ambitious plan. He wanted to lure America's remaining aircraft carriers into a trap, destroy them, and eliminate the U.S. Navy as a serious threat. It seemed like a brilliant strategy. The Japanese fleet was enormous. 4 elite aircraft carriers, hundreds of aircraft, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, thousands of experienced sailors. On paper, victory seemed inevitable, but Yamamoto had one problem. He didn't know that America had already discovered part of his plan. Months before the battle, American codebreakers had been working day and night to crack Japan's naval communications. Slowly, pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The intercepted messages repeatedly mentioned a mysterious target called AF.
American intelligence believed AF meant Midway, but they needed proof, so they came up with a simple trick.
Midway transmitted an unencrypted message saying its freshwater system had failed. Shortly afterward, Japanese communications reported that AF is short of water. The mystery was solved. The Americans now knew exactly where Japan intended to strike. This changed everything. Instead of sailing blindly into a trap, the U.S. Navy prepared its own.
3 American aircraft carriers quietly moved into position northeast of Midway. They waited, hidden beyond the horizon.
On the 4th of June 1942, the Japanese attack began. Aircraft roared off the carrier decks before sunrise.
Their first wave struck Midway Island. Bombs exploded across the airfield.
Smoke covered the sky, but the attack wasn't as successful as Japan had hoped. The island's defenses were damaged, yet they were still operational.
Japanese pilots reported that a second strike would be necessary. This forced a critical decision.
The reserve aircraft aboard the Japanese carriers had already been armed with torpedoes for possible attacks against enemy ships.
Now they needed to be rearmed with bombs for another attack on Midway. Crews rushed across crowded flight decks.
Bombs were removed. Torpedoes were loaded. Fuel hoses stretched across the carriers. Aircraft were moved back and forth. The decks became increasingly crowded.
At exactly the wrong moment, reports suddenly arrived. American warships had been spotted. Everything changed again. The Japanese crews reversed the process. Bombs came off. Torpedoes went back on.
Refueling continued. Aircraft filled the hangars. The carriers became floating warehouses packed with fuel and explosives.
No one realized how dangerous the situation had become.
Meanwhile, American aircraft had already taken off. Wave after wave searched desperately for the Japanese fleet.
Many couldn't find it. Some ran dangerously low on fuel. Others attacked without fighter protection. Torpedo squadrons charged directly toward the Japanese carriers. The attacks were brave, but disastrous. Almost every aircraft was shot down. Entire squadrons were destroyed.
At first glance, these sacrifices seemed pointless, but they accomplished something unexpected. Japanese fighter aircraft descended to low altitude to intercept the torpedo bombers.
The skies above the fleet were temporarily left unprotected.
Then, everything changed. High above the battlefield, American dive bombers finally found the Japanese carriers, almost by accident. They arrived at the perfect moment. The enemy fighters were too low. The anti-aircraft defenses were disorganized. The carriers below were fully loaded with fueled and armed aircraft. The American pilots began their dive. Within minutes, bombs struck 3 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Massive explosions erupted. Fuel ignited. Ammunition detonated. Flames spread uncontrollably across the ships. Crews fought desperately to save them.
It was impossible. 3 of Japan's greatest aircraft carriers had been mortally wounded. Then came the 4th. Later that afternoon, the carrier Hiryu launched counterattacks.
Its aircraft severely damaged the American carrier Yorktown. For a brief moment, Japan still had hope, but American scouts located Hiryu before sunset. Another wave of dive bombers attacked. More direct hits.
More explosions. Soon, Hiryu was burning as well. In a single day, Japan had lost all 4 frontline carriers that had attacked Pearl Harbor only 6 months earlier. Even more devastating was what went down with them. Hundreds of highly trained pilots, experienced mechanics, carrier crews whose skills could not be replaced quickly.
Japan could build new ships, but it could not rebuild years of experience overnight. America, on the other hand, had something Japan lacked: industrial power. New aircraft carriers were already under construction. Thousands of new pilots were entering training. From that moment forward, the balance of the Pacific War began to shift. Japan would continue fighting for years.
Many brutal battles still lay ahead: Guadalcanal, Leyte Gulf, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. But after Midway, Japan was no longer advancing. It was trying to survive.
Historians still debate many battles of World War II, but most agree on one point. Midway marked the moment the momentum changed. Not because the war ended that day,
but because the outcome became increasingly difficult for Japan to reverse.
Sometimes history doesn't change over decades. Sometimes it changes in just 5 minutes. 5 minutes of confusion. 5 minutes of perfect timing.
5 minutes that destroyed the most powerful carrier force in the Pacific.
And 5 minutes that changed World War II forever.
What do you think? Was Midway the single most important battle of World War II?
Or would history have changed even without it? Let me know your opinion in the comments.
And if you enjoy true stories of history's greatest battles, impossible missions, and world-changing moments,
don't forget to subscribe. There's always another incredible story waiting to be told.